Hello, Foxly listeners. Welcome to the episode today. I've got Hannah Tackett on the interview, and I'm really excited about this one because not only are we going to be talking about my favorite topic, which is collaboration, but how that can help you with burnout and how to even know if that's what you're experiencing. So I'm really excited to dive in. Hannah, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I am so excited to be here and share my story about burnout and how to end it and prevent it with your audience.
I'm Tanya Fox, and you're listening to Fox Talks Business Podcast. I started my career in the corporate world, but always played to my own tune and loved to think outside of the box. This didn't always serve me well with the bosses, so I made the decision to become an entrepreneur. And that little seed of entrepreneurial curiosity continued to grow as I branched out into retail, service, and franchise businesses. Now, I have been fortunate to have amazing successes in the last 2 decades, but they did not come without some really big failures and even bigger lessons learned. And that's why I started this podcast, not just to share the failures, but to show you how you can turn every failure into a success. We're going to hear from some amazing humans from around the world that are going to share their stories of the good, the bad, and the motivational entrepreneurial life has to offer. After all, life is too short to make all of the mistakes yourself, so why not learn from each other? And of course, we're going to have some fun, because as I always say, well, you know what? I'll tell you that at the end of the episode.
so
So talk to us a little bit, like, how did you get onto this topic? What was your sort of like aha moment that you were kind of like, uh-oh.
right. Well, this comes back. So I've burnt out a few times in my life. But the last burnout, the pivotal one, the tipping point, was in around 2017. I was working in tech as a software designer, and I have young children, 2 kids under 3 at the in the home, and I burnt out. And it was pretty extreme. I couldn't get out of bed for over a month. And I went to all the doctors, had all the tests done, and essentially nothing was wrong with my body. It was just that I was completely fried. And what made this significant was that I was terrified because I didn't want to lose my career, lose my job. I fought very hard to get in the door and to work my way up and to be where I was. I didn't want to fail as a mom and not be able to show up for my children the way that I wanted to. I didn't want my marriage to fall apart. Like I had things in my life that I'd worked so hard for and that I valued so highly. I wasn't willing to lie in bed for a year to recover. Like I needed to fix it and I needed to fix it quickly and I needed to do it without burning it all down. And so that was the tipping point for me. And really, I got onto this journey with that, right? So I had to recover myself, find my own pathway out of burnout, make sure it never happened again, and do it while still working full time, while still taking care of young children, while still showing up in my life to the best of my ability. And on that journey, I met so many women, so many entrepreneurs, women in leadership who have experienced their own burnout or who are in the middle of struggling through one. And I realized that this is a very common problem that we have and that women need help and that the help that is out there is not enough. So that's how I ended up where I am today, where I am now helping other women to prevent and end their own burnout and step into a life that they love and enjoy.
Well, and I think, a lot of times people think, or have it in their head that burnout is exactly what you experienced,
Right.
the end of days where you physically can't get out of bed. But talk to us a little bit about the degrees because it is sort of really unique to each individual person.
Absolutely, it is. And so I think of it as like there's different stages of burnout. So that initial stage is that the stress is getting to you. And so that looks like stress, right? So you're going to maybe be irritable, anxious, have tummy troubles, anxiety, the typical things that come up when we have unmanaged stress in our lives over time. And when that isn't addressed, when we don't figure out how to resolve that, that turns into that second stage of burnout where you're starting to feel resentment towards your job or your career or your business or your spouse or your family, where you feel trapped by your life, where you're feeling overwhelmed, maybe disassociated. So you get those kind of mental and emotional symptoms as well. And if that isn't addressed and turned around, then it heads into where it affects your ability to show up. And this is where you hear the stories about women who can't get out of bed, women who quit their jobs. One of my clients was struggling. She was having performance issues at work because she just dreaded it so much and was struggling with burnout for so long. And I think the most tragic thing, not only is it affecting your ability to be present for your kids, to show up as a wife, to be able to run your business, all the areas in your life that you care so deeply about, but it affects your confidence because you're having these performance issues and you may or may not know why, because it does, even though it's gradual and it builds up over years, it feels like you hit a wall, like out of nowhere, because you've just been pushing it down, all these stress symptoms, prioritizing your own care, taking care of everyone else, and it sneaks up on us. But it is a very gradual process, and it happens over time. And it's not necessarily like someone just flipped a switch. It's gradual and it's building, and it is something that can be stopped and turned around and reversed. So,
well, and I think a lot of times that what gets confusing, or what I think people put it aside and go, oh, this is just isn't burnout. It's just me not being good enough or not performing good enough, because again, we have such a skewed,
yes.
filtered societal view of like, I should be able to handle all of this. Like I should be able to handle a job and work and, and life, and then be active, and then be happy, and then be engaged. And, so I find that sometimes you get that feeling and then you're almost like stockpiling stress because you're
Mhm.
like, I'm supposed to be able to do
Right.
all of it.
Yes. And we don't get good feedback from professionals. Like when I went in, I was like, I'm not getting up. I'm exhausted. I'm not functioning. They're like, oh, you're just a mom. Almost like it was normal. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I know moms at CrossFit who are killing it. I know moms at the office who are killing it. I am not killing it. I'm in
Yeah.
bed. There's something wrong.
Yeah. They're killing it. I'm dying.
I'm dying. Yeah, I am suffering. What is the difference? And I wanted to
Yeah.
know what the difference was. Like these women who could do it all on the outside, and myself, where I mean, honestly, for decades I was doing it all. So what at what point do we crumble,
Yeah.
And so like I love what you're saying, where the expectation is that, or our own expectation, and this is partially programming from the world around us, is that we are expected to do it all. We're expected to perform at work just like all the men. We're supposed to be able to come home and do the second and third shift without batting an eye. We're supposed to be able to just maintain a perfect body and make homemade meals, and like all these crazy expectations that are completely unrealistic. We put on ourselves, or we ingest them, and it's not true, right? First of all, you don't have to do anything. And the first step, I think, towards preventing and ending burnout is identifying or pursuing what I like to call like pursuing your yes. So what are you intentionally saying yes to in your life? Because we've all inherited all these obligations, these expectations, these things that we're doing, all the shoulds in life. And really kind of getting like ripping all of that back and like what actually matters to you. Does it matter to
Yeah.
you if you make homemade ketchup? I mean, come on.
Right.
Like,
Because he wants to do that. But I think, a lot of times what happens too is like, I remember when I got married and my aunt had said, like, be careful what you do, because whatever you do when you're first together will
oh
become
yeah,
your task. So
standards.
think carefully about it. And I sort of took that to everything, that I was like, I really want to be careful about what I take ownership of, over.
Mhm.
Because I got married later in life. So I had lived alone. So I was used to kind of doing it all. But I was like, I notice now, 20 years in, that I'm like, yeah, there's some stuff that I shouldn't have touched, right? That I shouldn't have taken, ownership of. Cause I think we do, like I can't ask help. I've always done that. I always have to do it. I can't ask help for that now.
And right, well, that's kind of a default setting, right? So you've done it, you've always done it, so you're going to continue to do it. But the reality is, you actually can ask for help. You can drop it and see what happens. So yeah, so that's where that delegation or collaboration comes into play. Is like one of the biggest shifts that we can make when we are a woman who's doing it all. We're superwoman. We've been on our A game forever, but we are feeling the pressure and we're beginning to crumble, right? So the first thing, like figure out what you're actually saying yes to in your life. That helps it become much easier to say no to the things that are not going to get you there. Like if making homemade ketchup is not going to get you to your primary goal, which may be, accelerating your business, don't do it. Don't feel guilty about it. Outsource that. Delegate it. is going from being superwoman who does it all to being a leader and stepping into a leadership role where you enlist the people around you, whether it's your family, whether it's your teammates, whether it's your employees, to step up and pick up the things that you've gone through and you've prioritized, and you realize, okay, well, these handful of things I'm not going to eliminate, because the first thing to do is like get rid of it. If you can get rid of it, get rid of it. Focus, right? But if it's something that matters, it needs to be done, but you don't love doing it, it does not fill your cup, it sucks you down. It's time to delegate that task and train someone else and empower someone else. And I think that's the biggest mental shift, is going from doing it all yourself. You've been superwoman your whole life. This is your identity. You are the unicorn. You are the one that gets it done. Everyone knows you as the reliable one that gets everything done, and probably has a very high level of expertise and perfection in your work. And letting that go and shifting into, well, now I'm a leader. And now it's my job to enable other people to support me, to inspire others to buy into my dream. And that can be in the household, that can be in the office, that can be in your business, that can show up in so many different ways in our lives. And I feel like that's such a big mental shift to make, because a lot of the behavior that is driving that I can do it all myself, some of those behaviors are, well, first of all, they're behaviors that are patterns now, they're habits. Like you said, you've been doing it for however many years. How can you ever stop? But those behaviors where I like to think of them as like the 5 success traps, because they are the behaviors that have driven us to success. But at a certain phase, at a certain point in our life, and if they're driven possibly by fear, then they can drive us to burnout as well. And so those 5 success traps, you probably heard people talking about. It's like, okay, there's the people pleasing. So you want to make sure that everyone is happy. You want to make sure your clients are happy, your family is happy, your husband's happy, your kids are happy, your in-laws are happy, everyone's happy. It's not possible. So that being your motivation is going to be very unfulfilling in life. So that's why it's so, so important to get really clear on your yes. Another behavior or success trap that I see women falling into is the perfectionism. So that one I think is talked about more, where we have a certain standard and we're known for that standard. And our perfectionist behaviors have driven us to success. And it's hard to let go of that, because there's a positive feedback loop, right? You're getting acknowledgement, you're getting success, you're getting clients because you have a certain standard. But at a certain point, it crosses a line into driving us to burnout. And being able to let it go and delegate that to someone else and accept that they're not going to do it the same way that you would, right? It's not, maybe not be as good, or maybe it's just going to be done a little differently, and just letting that go and realizing that you don't have to be the perfectionist to be successful, because at this point, it's time to be a leader. The third one is being the helper. And I know so many of women especially are raised to be helpful.
Yes.
So you see the people on your team struggling, you jump in and you help them, you do it for them, you're hand-holding, you're hovering, you're coaching, you're helping your kids do everything, you're helping your husband do everything, you're helping your business do everything, you're constantly stepping in.
Oh, here, let me.
Yeah. And that can be an amazing and beautiful characteristic or behavior, but out of balance, it can drive us to burnout, because we're no longer clear on what it is that we want, because we're trying to take care of everyone else's wants and needs and filling all the gaps. And we lose that focus.
Yeah. And it's a hard thing to do. I mean, I remember when I had a store, and so there was staff, and I was always readily available, and I was heading towards burnout, because anytime there was an issue or a question, they would always call. And it was never like very taxing, let's say, on me to go, oh, this is where it is, or this is who you'd order to, this is who you call. Like, I always had the answer, and it wasn't really hard. But I also was starting to feel like I never had time off. I was always on call. I always had to have my phone with me. And, I just kind of decided one day, what would happen if I didn't answer the phone? And I realized that I had to give them the permission to screw everything up, but also understand, figure out what you would do if I wasn't there. And they shockingly, and I will say it was shockingly to me, they figured it out.
Of course
but
they
it
did.
was just
Yeah.
easier, right? But like I had it in my head that they needed me. I mean, I was the leader. I was the, you know, the top of the food chain kind of thing. I had to help them. But I realized that I was gifting them so much more by not answering that phone and making them find the answers to
Mhm.
themselves. And then eventually like the phone calls just stopped because they figured it out. And then it was like, but that was a really hard thing to let go, you know, if I'm honest, to let go of the ego of
Right.
I'm the one who has the answers.
Yes, it's that need to be needed.
Mhm.
And it's that need to be recognized and have that interaction with others and people coming to you as the expert. And it feels really good until it doesn't. And
Yeah.
so,
You
yeah,
kinda get that hit at the beginning of like,
yeah, yeah. And so,
it's gonna
yeah, so
fall apart without me.
it's going to fall apart. I'm so needed. I'm so important. But I mean, I know people who have built businesses with this mindset have been running these businesses for 30 years, want to retire. They want to sell their business. They can't.
Yeah.
They can't sell their business because they didn't set up those structures and systems in place to make themselves irrelevant,
Yeah.
so that it'll run without them. And that's really, I think, for a lot of business owners, kind of a goal.
Well,
So,
it's supposed to be, but yeah, it's a
yeah,
hard one to wrap your head around of that you're like, I am going to work myself out of a career
yes,
and out of
I'm
a
going to make
business.
myself useless. No, but what you're doing is you're empowering others. So,
Yeah.
like I said, you're shifting from being Superwoman to being a leader who has empowered her people to find their own answers and know that if they screw up, you've got their back
Mhm.
because they will screw up occasionally. But yeah, most people, like, if you give them the space to perform, they do. They do.
Yeah. So when you were kind of going through your, you know, the big burnout that you had and you kind of came to
Mhm.
this realization of like I have to do this because I think they're and correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember kind of feeling like a little shameful because the same thing like I had experienced a similar story to yours where I
Mhm.
had all of these tests being done and they're like you're fine, you're fine, you're fine. It's all in your head.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm going, well, there's a lot of shit up there then. Because like all of this stuff is going on. For you, was there something that like helped you just kind of take that first step? Like, was it just sheer, like, I don't want to be this anymore? Or was there like a quote that you saw? Or like, what was it that made you kind of sit up?
Well, I think it was the terror of failing as a mom and of losing my job. So I really felt like, okay, my life is going to implode. It is
Right.
in the process of imploding right now. I can't afford that. I fought too hard to get here. This has to change. I have to be able to show up. And then from there, after that, I had that moment of I have to change. I made ending burnout my number one priority. So, which ended up being prioritizing myself. I put my own health and my well being as my number one priority because I'm the linchpin in my life.
Right.
Nothing else is going to happen in my world unless I figure my own stuff out. And if that means I'm not everything for everybody, then that's what that means.
Hmm. Which I think
Uh,
is hard for a lot of people. You know, I can say this as a woman, but I think especially women because you know, we hear terms like selfish or must be nice, you know, and you're
yeah,
like, must be nice. Oh my God. Like I've literally been standing on my feet for 17 hours, like 5 days a week, and I'm putting my feet into like a hot bath for 5 minutes. Could you all just calm down? But right, that self-care seems to be, and even when you were saying the list of like, I think if everybody sat there and thought, like, who do you take care of? As you were saying that list, I was like, it was a long time that I would say, oh, yeah, I've got like my mom, my dad was ill at the time,
mhm,
my husband, my son, the dog. Like, I never made it. I never made it on my own list. And from what
right.
I hear that you're saying is that's like almost the first thing that needs to change is
That
you
is the
need
first
to
thing.
be the first person on your list.
Pursue your own yes. And
Yeah.
so, in order to do that, you have to prioritize your own health, your own needs. And I know it's so, so hard, like you're saying, for all of us because we feel guilty about it. But here's the thing, if you don't, eventually you will burn out. And what that means is that the stress is going to continue to accumulate in your body, in your mind, in your life until your body forces you to stop. And then you might lose all these things that you think are so precious that you're prioritizing over yourself. And another flip side of this is like, okay, so after coming to this realization and prioritizing myself, I realized once I cut a lot of the noise out and stopped doing everyone else's job for them, I was able to show up with so much more clarity, so
Mm.
much more focus. I was so much more productive, like 10, 20, 50 times more productive on task than I ever had been before. I was present with my children, not just there, not just going through the checklist of the day, getting them up in the morning, feeding them, dressing them, getting
Mhm.
them to school, picking them up, doing the dinner routine. I was actually emotionally present with my children because I had the space, the bandwidth, because I created that space and I had to fill my own cup first. And I know it's such a hard lesson to learn. It's something that's so hard for us to swallow, especially if we've been marching to the hustle culture drumbeat and have accepted that, oh, we don't matter. We're the last on the list. Put everyone else before yourself. Um, but I think, treat others the way that you want to be treated. Well, how do you want to be treated? How are you treating
Mhm.
yourself? You can't love someone unless you love yourself, not truly, because there's going to be a little tickle of resentment in there, just a little bit. And that resentment can build up. And then we start acting in ways that are not healthy and wonderful to our family and our kids and our business and our clients. And then we start doing funny things like self-sabotage. And it becomes this downward kind of sucking spiral. And it's something that can be completely ended and turned around. You have to, figure out what does matter to you, prioritize your own. I mean, treat yourself like you're a business investment. And you are absolutely the most critical business investment that you could ever make. Your health is a business investment. Your emotional and mental robustness and clarity is a business investment. And that investment pays off exponentially. So putting yourself last, you're going to end up in a place where your business is going to start to grind to a halt. You're going to grind to a halt. It's not worth it. It's not worth it.
Well, and I think even having that conversation that you would have with, a sister or a best friend, or, like I think for me, it was, somebody saying to me, like, if this was, your sister, like, what would your response
Jeez.
be? And I was like, I'd go up one side of her, down the other. Like, I mean, there'd be some smacking involved, going like,
Right.
what are you doing?
Yeah.
Right. Kind of thing. But we don't have that conversation with ourselves because, again, we're trying to live up to this weird, falsified ideal of what balance is. And I know I struggled with that,
Mhm.
for a long, almost a decade of my career of going, I'm trying to find this balance and realizing it doesn't exist. Like sometimes my business gets more and sometimes my family gets more. And it's more of a teeter totter than,
Yeah.
than, 50-50 balance.
No. I love that you brought the word balance because I used to really hate that word. Because people would say you need work-life balance
Yeah.
or balance this. And I would imagine, those awful stock illustrations of like
Oh,
the woman with like the briefcase and the baby, and she's got like juggling going on. And I would imagine that as balance. And I'm like, I don't want balance. That looks awful.
that
Or
looks,
like
yeah. While
I'd
on a
imagine
tightrope, you're like,
yeah,
yeah, okay, this
tightrope.
is
We're
great.
walking on
Yeah.
a tightrope and you're going to balance all the time. Like that takes a ton of effort. And it took so long for me to kind of shift my mindset around balance and like understand what that means or what it's supposed to mean. And it does not mean standing on one foot while holding a baby in one hand and your business in the other. That's not what balance is. Balance is it's like the yin yang symbol, like,
Right.
or another way to think of it is it's like the day. So in the day you have the sun is up, it is daytime, it is time to be on, it is time to be active and interacting with people, and then there is the night, it is time to rest. It's also like the seasons. Balance is like the seasons are not all the same, right? They're not all a specific percentage of light and dark and hot and cold. There's seasons to life, and so balance is more like finding the rhythm that supports your life. And that includes, like, I like to think of it like, you hear about leaning in, the book Leaning In.
Right.
I like to think, okay, so if you're going to be intentional about leaning in, you need to be as intentional and strategic about leaning out because you need both. You need to be able to lean out and you need to be able to lean in. And like you're saying, like sometimes the business gets more, sometimes your home gets more. There are seasons in life. Just be honest with yourself about what season you're in and what really matters to you right now.
Yeah. And I think, I know like even this particular season that I'm in right now, I struggled with, like, I was going, I really want to switch to a shorter week. We just
Mhm.
got a lake lot this year for the first time. And I found myself kind of, again, not putting myself first. And I think it's like something that constantly creeps up because, of course, I was like, hey, I'm going to go out early. Because, of course, we're going to spend every weekend out there. My son just graduated, so he doesn't care that I exist. Anyway, he's happy when I leave. And so I was like, I'm going to go out every Thursday, but my husband works like a regular job, right? Like a corporate job. And he was like, oh, well, I can't go out. And there was like a huge part of me that was like, okay, like I'll wait. And then I was like, no, hang on a second. That's not my problem. Right. I was like, I need this. Like I worked hard for this, to sort of get this. But again, I think it's something that I had to like, it's easier. It comes quicker when I notice I'm doing that stuff because I've been doing the work. But I think this is recognizing the signs of burnout and how that changes as your life changes and continuously working on it, I think is something that never ends.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, it's something that like I follow my own system today, like just to make sure that I am giving myself space and able to show up as the person I want to be instead of just grinding through the day endlessly. And you're right, it doesn't ever end, especially if you're wired like a high achiever. Like if you're wired
Right.
in a way, and a lot of us are, that you've been going your whole life. Maybe you subscribed or have subscribed at some point to the idea that to be worthy is to be busy. Right. So
Yes.
busyness is a badge of honor. If you're busy, that means you're meaningful, which is not true. You don't have to be busy to be valuable. Um,
I always say there's a lot going up here all the time. So even if I'm sitting still, nothing is ever still. I'm having meetings. They're good. They're happening.
you're doing the pre-work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so yes, I think it's letting go of the hustle culture and giving yourself a new mindset towards what is productivity. Because I think there's a myth that productivity is linear,
Mhm.
when it's more cyclical. It ebbs and it flows. It's like a tide, right? There's a high tide, there's a low tide. There's an ebb and flow to productivity. And when you read, the books out there that are about productivity, there's a lot about deep work and focus and getting into a flow. And that doesn't happen in a state of busyness or in a state of
Right.
multitasking. And so realizing that as a human being, to be the most productive you can't be on all the time. You need that ebb and flow. And the most brilliant, impactful, so if you think about impact as value, the most impactful people in the world took time off to let their minds wander, because
Mhm.
magical things happen in your brain when you wander, when you're off, when
Yeah.
you're just walking without any pressure, when you're taking a shower, when you're on a long drive, when you're kind of like on autopilot and your brain can just kind of synthesize. That's when the most powerful, impactful ideas are going to come together. And
Yeah.
so by being strategic and planning for that space, like what you just said, having that 4-day weekend, or like, however long it is for you, that is beautiful. It's probably incredibly productive in an impactful way for
Yeah.
you and your business, because that's when the magic is going to happen.
Yeah, and I always say, like, I say to myself and my clients, like, if you're ever not feeling creative, boredom is the best place that you can go to.
Yes.
So just sitting in like a silent room and just looking around, that's when my biggest and best ideas have always come to me. And that was just from like watching my son when he was younger be like, Mom, I'm bored, right? Like get to sick and
Yeah.
like kids do, I'm so bored. And I'm like, okay. And I would leave him like there was no answer, there was like no other thing. And that was when at the end of the night, like he would, would be bored for a bit and he'd mope. And then all of a sudden,
Mhm.
like, a stick would turn into a wand or it would turn into a cane or like all these different ideas would come up because he would just figure out a way to get out of the boredom.
Yeah,
And I started kind of going, like, we need to continue to harness this because that's where that, like you were saying, that's where the imagination sparks up. That's where the ideas start coming in. That's where you kind of stop thinking about, the to-do lists or the
yeah,
emails or all those like other inundating things come in. It allows you to kind of be bored and then allows your mind to take over.
absolutely. And I love it because yeah, you go from manually pushing like a boulder up a hill, like your
Right.
goal, your grit, you're just making it happen yourself. And when you get into that space, when you let it go and you allow your brain to do its own thing, that's when flow happens. Like that's when serendipity happens. That's when ideas that will accelerate your results happen. And it's so, so powerful. And I think that's why we're seeing such an increase in burnout. One of the reasons, there's several reasons I think that's happening. But as far as seeing an increase in people saying that they're burning out, is because we've lost a lot of the white space in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Back when I was growing up, before the interwebs and the phone, I had a lot of white space.
Yeah.
There was time in between classes, time in between meetings, time in between where I had nothing to do. Maybe I brought a book with me or a journal and I would doodle, but there was no phone, there was no
Oh,
constant
I
connection.
miss those days where it
I
was like people would just call and you're like, I don't know. Like as a kid, I don't like we left the house when it was
do.
light and we came back when the street lights came on. I've
Right.
like we just weren't allowed in the house. Like,
Yep.
and I would like see reels that people are like, what did you do when you were thirsty? Like, I don't know, I found a hose and drank out of it. Like you went back to your house? No, we're
No,
like 4 blocks
no.
away. Like, no, we survived. But I think
Right.
we've I feel like society has created such a thing where, like you had said, being busy has almost become a weird badge of honor. And
Mhm.
even kids these days, I feel are we're seeing more of like kids and teenagers like being burnt out. And I'm going, like I'm hearing some of them and they're like, yeah, because I go to school all day. And then when I'm done school, like I have band practice and I do that for an hour. And then I have soccer, and then I go to martial arts and then I have this to do. And I'm like, good Lord, I would not be able to do your schedule. Like I thought my schedule was insane. Like look at a
Mhm.
teenager schedule. I'm like, and then you have school and like, it's almost like we're preconditioning them
To
to
be busy and
fill
frenetic.
the calendar. Like if your calendar is full, that's a good thing. And I try to like if I can open up my calendar and there's like few colors, I'm like, yes, that's success to me. Because I've managed my time better, like you said, to have that
Mhm.
that white space that's so needed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, no, I see it. I've got younger kids and in the midst of trying to bring them up in this world, it's like, oh my goodness, summer camps, constant this, constant that. I'm like, this is not how I grew up.
Yeah.
This is, it is so not how I grew up. And it's so true because our developing brain and our adult brain need the space.
Yeah.
They need the margin in life, they need the white space. So like if you're in between meetings, put your phone down. Don't look at it. Give yourself a break because the stress response needs time and white space to complete. And if the minute you're out of a stressful meeting, you're picking up your phone and you're scrolling, you're like pushing down that stress, as in not
Mm,
getting rid of it, you're keeping it, you're masking over it, but it's not going away. And because you're doing that, your nervous system is in a place where it's being drained. It affects your body, it affects your mind, it affects the way we eat, the things that we crave, it affects the way we sleep, it affects how we interact with other people. And then think to make it worse is the things that we're doing on our phones. Like the
mhm.
scrolling is designed intentionally to be addictive, and it lights up the same area of your brain as gambling. And engaging in that on a regular basis every single day, like actually changes the structure of your brain and it increases your likelihood of struggling with anxiety and depression. So not only are we filling the white space that we used to have, that we used to be able to complete our stress cycle with things that push that down and don't allow us to complete our stress cycle, but we're filling it with things that increase our stress. It doesn't
Yeah.
feel like it at the time because we're getting those dopamine hits, right? But it is increasing our stress levels over time. And I think that that's kind of why over the past several years we've been seeing a ramp up in depression, anxiety, burnout, stress, because there's no white space in
Yeah.
in the average person's life. It's filled with that phone, the busyness, the checking of the emails, the looking at the scroll, all these things, and so we don't have that time in our life to like let it go.
Yeah. That constant need of connection. Yeah, I've like gotten rid of all of my emails and stuff like that off of my phone, and because right, you get sucked into it and you don't mean to, but somehow that app opens itself, right? It's like an unconscious thing. But I really love the tip of, just even, when you're done a meeting or, or if you go on podcasts and you're done an interview, like I always take a minute to just like get up and like just walk around.
Yeah.
Because I want to, think about, I want to chew on. I think for me, I need everything to have that moment to absorb in.
Hmm.
But also I'm like a highly passionate person. So depending if the meeting got me really excited or if the meeting got me really angry, I need a moment to let it dissipate before I move on to a new project. But not even realizing, like, as you say it now, I realize that's a good thing that I'm doing that because it's
Yeah.
allowing me to kind of go back to neutral almost
Hmm.
before I then continue on with something else.
Yes, absolutely. It's that reset, those little tiny resets all day long, every day, week after week that are the difference between burning out and not burning out.
Yeah. And something so simple, right? But
Mhm.
obviously something that you have to, continuously do because it's so uh
It's so easy.
yeah, and it's so like just ingrained. You're like done meeting, pick up phone, right? Or you
Mhm.
pick up your phone and you unlock it and the first thing you do is, open a social media app or something. It's we see that in so many people that were like, "Oh, I didn't even know I opened it." And you're like, "That's a problem."
Yeah, there's a psychologist in California, I forgot his name. He calls it popcorn brain.
Yeah.
And because, like I said, it restructures your brain. And these habits, this, relationship that we have with technology has shaped our brain in such a way that we have an urge or a need or a desire to interact with our phone or with whatever it is. And training ourselves, retraining ourselves to drop it and give yourself that time to feel a little bit uncomfortable, process your feelings, process your desire to pick up a phone and be distracted is if you don't, first of all, most of us don't realize that we need to do that. They don't realize like, oh, that's actually important. Your phone is not actually lowering your stress levels. It's just giving you a kick of dopamine, but the stress is still there in your body.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, knowing that you need to do it is one thing, but then taking a step towards intentionally training yourself, creating structures in your life, like making it harder to get to your phone, putting it in another room, put the charger away from your bed, things like that kind of help. Just adding friction because as a designer, I know that reducing friction in using these applications is like one of the main things that we do. We make it so easy on
Yeah.
purpose. We're paid a lot of money to make it very easy to suck you in.
Yeah. And I
So
think
yeah,
not using the excuses, because I know for the longest time, well, my husband still does to this day, goes, but it's my alarm clock. And I'm like, they still make those, right? Like the old ones. Like there's even one with the little bell where a guy will hit the
ding a ding
bell,
a ding. Yeah.
repeat it. Like, do you want to try something else? Like, but he does. He has his phone, you know, always with them, and mine goes and charges in another room because I know I'm too tempted. And I
Mm-hmm.
know that I've developed, I call it phone ear, where it's like a baby and I can hear it in the middle of my my
Ah,
night
yeah.
in a dead sleep. I can hear it vibrate and I know it's vibration sound, which sounds stupid, but I'm sure there's a lot of people that are like, well, yeah, my phone could be 2 rooms away and if it vibrates, I know it. Right?
Yeah.
It's like airplane mode has come in handy numerous times for me to go, right, phone does come with an off button.
Right. Yes, it does. And you're right about the reasons that we use it. So if you need a break,
Mhm.
like my husband used to use it for the news, but
Right,
everything is so sensationalized, right? That it's, ramping up your emotions and increasing your stress levels. So I got him a newspaper that's delivered to our house every week, old fashioned, old
yeah,
school. Um, and then I use my Apple Watch, which I don't have on right now, as my silent alarm because I don't want to wake him up in the morning.
right.
I just don't need phone near my bed. Like I'm good. I just wake up to a little buzz. Zzz, time to get up. So yeah, there's so many options. Even using technology, there's options to solve for what we are using our phones for, but solve it in a way that we can actually have a little bit more at space and areas in our life to breathe without having the constant inundation and demands on our attention.
So we've talked a lot about sort of what are some of the signs and the symptoms and stuff. What if somebody is like, nope, nope, can't do that? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people who are like, no, 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 like I need to have my phone on me all the time, which I always go, no, you don't, because I used to work in a hospital and even surgeons were like, my phone's not on. And I'd be like, well, what if we need to get a hold of you? And he's like, there's another doctor, like somebody else can perform the surgery, like, or they'll
Mhm.
die, but I need a break. Like it was so funny to hear them, right? But they were like figure it out. Like I'm just
Well,
not going to be
right.
on. So what are some of the besides that? What are some of, sort of the costs that can be associated for a business person ignoring these red flags that we've,
Oh,
given many descriptions of?
Oh my goodness. So,
besides just the burnout?
just aside from not being able to get out of bed. Well, one woman that I know, she was actually in corporate, but she was in leadership in corporate. She was making over 400K a year. And she got to a point where she just couldn't keep going. And she ignored it for so long that she blew it all up. She quit her job. She moved to an island and started making $8 an hour as a climbing instructor. And it took her 4 years to recover. She spent 4 years living off of her savings. She walked away from over $1 million in stock options. Um, and then by the time she came back, between the missed income, the stocks and benefits she walked away from, living off, tapping into her retirement, that burnout cost her over $2 million.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one example of someone in a corporate arena. I know another woman that I've worked with, when she burnt out, she divorced her husband. And just there was just so much pain and drama in her family. And when she finally healed, she was like, oh, I think that could have been prevented, but water under the bridge, right? Moving forward. But yeah, so the cost can be really high. So, I mean, you've got your typical, I can't get up, but then there's also like, you could end up burning down your business, burning down everything that you've worked so hard to build for yourself because you're so sick of it.
Mm-hmm.
So sick of it. Maybe you burn a relationship with a client because, you cracked under pressure. It happens. Maybe you haven't been participating in your children's lives for a decade because you're busy all the time. And when you are there, your brain is busy. So there's relationship cost, there's financial cost, there's also health cost. Like this thing that we're speaking of ambiguously, like, okay, maybe I didn't have anything actually wrong with me when I went in, but if I had continued on that path, I guarantee you I would have manifested some sort of diagnosable disease, and that
Yeah.
happens too, where people burn out, they make themselves literally sick.
I think our bodies just get to a point where it's like, listen, if you're not going to stop, I'm going to stop you.
Exactly. And stress does kill. Stress
Right.
kills. And that is known. Stress is a big, big problem. And by stress, I mean that long, chronic, unmanaged stress that piles and piles and piles and piles and piles, because we're supposed to have stress in our lives, but we're also supposed to work through it, complete the stress cycle and move on. We're not supposed to carry it forward every minute of the day into the next day, into the next day, into the next week, into the next month, into the next year, until we can't get up anymore, until our thyroid throws a fit and suddenly we can't function, or until we develop some sort of disease in our body because our body is so inflamed and exhausted from the cortisol, because cortisol does all kinds of fun things to us. It's supposed to go up, but it's also supposed to go down.
Down. Right.
It's supposed to bring it back down.
We're forgetting
It's
about
there
that
for good
other
reasons.
direction.
Yeah.
So you have a thing, because I think one of the things that people think is like time, right? Time is on people's brains so much, and they're, like we hear this so often. I think I've heard it already 4 times today. Like just on, because I was bad and I was scrolling through social media and stuff, like I just need more hours in the day, and I'm like, no, you don't. So if people are doing it, you have sort of a cheat sheet about how you can cut your work hours. Can you talk to us a little bit this and maybe give us like a little snippet of what they'll find on this cheat sheet?
Absolutely. So yes, so you can use this cheat sheet. If you even apply one or two of the principles that are in there, you will find hours in your week. You can cut your hours up to 20%, up to 50%. I have people cut their hours very dramatically following these principles. And essentially what you'll find is like a little bit deeper of a dive with some of the things that we've discussed, these 7 principles where you can, when you apply them in your life, you start getting more clarity, you start cutting out the noise, and you become more effective and efficient when you are working. And your rest becomes higher quality, you're completing the stress cycle, so that you're not moving forward in a frenetic, disconnected state. And so there's 7 principles that are covered in it with very practical, applicable actions that you can take. And you don't have to do them all. I know that's, 7, that sounds like a lot. You just do 1 or 2, pick your favorite, and it will make a difference in your life. So that is the slash your hours by 20% cheat sheet. You can find it at serenesuccess.net/pod. And yeah, I've gotten a lot of good feedback on it, and would love to be able to help you out. If you resonated with any of the I'm a perfectionist, a people pleaser, I'm too busy kind of thinking and feeling, then yeah, that's for you for sure.
Yeah. Well, we'll make sure we have the links to where they can, find that, but also, find your website. Cause I was even snooping on it beforehand, and you have, even on your page of like some of the red flags. And I think a lot of people, might read them and know, like you said, of the ones of, being stressed or feeling like you have too much going on, you can't handle it. But there was a few that I think some people might go, oh, I never even thought of that. Like you had ones like, loss of satisfaction, I believe, was one of them. And a lot of people think, oh, well, it's just because I'm tired, right? I just need to eat a Snickers or something like that. But I think there's so often times that we, make excuses, that I would invite all of the listeners to head over to your website and take a look at these and go, oh my gosh, like, am I just excusing this behavior, or am I just excusing this thing that's happening that could be resulting in a bigger problem? Because the last thing I think anybody wants to do is be like, no, I just want to lie in bed and not be able to function for a couple of months.
Yes, or years. I've talked to people who it's taken years to recover. Um, so yeah, it's worth stopping now, before you're at a point where you can't get out of bed, before you're at a point where your relationships are falling apart, before you're at a point where you've blown up your business and just walked away from everything beautiful in your life that you spent so much time and effort to build. So
So if someone is out there and they're like, okay, yeah, like I'm going through this, but I don't think I can do it on my own. Can they work with you if they're just like, listen, I'm 30 years in and I'm not doing a good job at figuring this out on my own. I need help.
absolutely. So yeah, so the principles are simple, but like I said, execution can be challenging because of our habits, because of who we've been for the past 20, 30, 40 years. And so yes, absolutely. So on that cheat sheet, there's a way to reach out, and you can get some time on my calendar. And what we can do is we can go through your life and go through those principles and kind of pick out what will make the biggest impact for you today and what is holding you back, and like really troubleshoot and kind of get you focused on that. And then I also have a program that I run that's a group program. Also has one-on-one coaching, so you get the attention, you get the deep dives that you need, and also like the community of other people going through this too, where we work through it together and accelerate that recovery. So it doesn't take you 4 years to recover from burnout. It takes you less than 3 months.
Well, and I think that you have that accountability, right? Because oftentimes I think there's a lot of people who you're kind of doing this by yourself because maybe you don't have a partner who's like, no, I'm fine. It's good. Like, and so it's nice to have people that are, of the same mind and working on the same things that you can kind of go, oops,
Absolutely. I
help.
think it's really important to have people supporting you, because like you've got your clients, your boss, your spouse, your kids, everyone's got demands for you.
Hmm.
And you're very likely to go and fulfill those demands before you even begin to fulfill your own demands. So someone else holding you accountable and holding that space for you and saying this actually does matter is so powerful, especially because honestly, this is kind of counterculture.
Right. Well,
Learning
and
to
I
take care
know,
of ourselves is counterculture.
yeah. And I know even when I would clear my calendar, I had to be very careful because I realized people would be like, what do you have going on today? And I'd be like, oh, nothing. My day is like completely free. And they're like, can you?
Ah,
I'd be
yes.
like,
Oh,
damn it. Like I had to learn for a little bit until I could really uh trust myself to say no, I cannot. And to just
yeah.
know that no was a full sentence. I didn't have to explain myself. I didn't
Hmm.
have to justify it. Is to just be like fully booked today. Anytime it was
Absolutely.
an empty day, I'd be like, oh my God, back to back. Because otherwise everybody's like, oh, perfect. Could you do my
Mhm.
job?
Yes. Did you do my job? Yes. Yeah. So yes. Oh, this is my heads down day. I have so much to do. Or like, there's ways to frame things so that you're not opening yourself up for 10 million new requests.
Yeah.
Uh, and there's a lot of ways to say no that don't even like for those of us out there in the audience who are afraid of saying no, or who find it very, very difficult to say no. There's ways to say no without ever using the word.
Right.
And it's just a skill. Saying no is a skill. You can
So
learn
what
how
is one that you use instead of saying no,
to
I'm not
straight
doing
no.
that?
Well, I think one of my favorites in a client or boss situation is a this or that. So would you like this or that in this
Ah, I
time
like
frame?
that.
In this time
Right.
frame, right? So this or that, great. Then you have some forced prioritization, and maybe it's a. So if we do this, it'll have an impact on that. So that, because a
Right.
lot of times when someone is coming to you asking for something, they don't actually understand the full impact of what they're asking for. They don't understand what the downstream effects are going to be. So just bringing it up to a simple this or that kind of a conversation. If I do this, then that will happen. Or would you want me to do this thing first or that thing first? And then that can also, if they want both at the same time, that can turn into a resourcing conversation.
I think
So
my son uses this on me. As you're saying it, I'm like, he does that to me all the time. Then I'm like, you need to like get your room clean. You need to do laundry. And he's like, I got to head to work. So do you want me to do the laundry or clean room? Like what?
beautiful. That's a wonderful skill he has.
But I'm just like, little bugger always gets away with not having to do one. By the time it circles back around, I've forgotten.
Exactly. And so will
But
your
look at
boss.
that good skill that he knows. She'll forget about it eventually.
Yep. Yes.
I love that. Well, Hannah, thank you so much for coming on the show today. We'll make sure we have all of the links where people can get to you. And I really appreciated having you on because I think, a lot of times people think it has to be at the very end. It has to be dire of all dire situations for it to be burnout, and
Mhm.
not realizing that this is something that needs to be preventative and something that you continuously do because burnout will show up in different ways. It's not just a one and done.
Yeah.
It's something that you kind of have to always have your eye out that it's sneaking around the corner. So I'm hopeful, and I know that our audience probably got a lot out of this. So I so appreciate you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me on. And I do hope that the listeners are thinking, okay, if I feel resentful, that is a red flag to tune into. So,
Love
yes.
that. Thank you so much to Hannah for coming on the show. I think, this is such a valuable topic because so often, as I said in the intro, people think that burnout is, the end of days. It's when everything has already imploded. But the truth is that there's so many times and moments in our life where we're experiencing it, but passing it off as simple stress or everybody's dealing with this or just not acknowledging it at all. And it is one of the most dangerous things not to acknowledge for yourself and in your business. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you got some takeaways. Head over to the link in the description so that you can check out her cheat sheet. Get yourself some more free time, which we could all use. And also check out our website. There's a lot of valuable information and resources on there so that you can start taking the steps to lead a life that's going to be better aligned for you, especially for you, mostly for you, so you can start putting yourself first and then put everybody else where they need to be in priority and feel like you have it all together. It's not going to come easy, but it's going to be work that you need to do, an investment worth taking. So no matter what it is that you're doing today, take a moment to just put your phone down and experience boredom and then have some fun. Because if you're not having fun, why are you doing it?